We're here with Skip Groff, known for a lot of different things around Washington, D.C., DJ, record store owner, producer. Let's get started.
I'm a good guy.
Yes. Appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
Wanted to sort of start with, was going to start at the beginning, but we'll start at where you're at now, and then we'll go back, then we'll circle right back to the beginning. So you have a radio show that you do a couple times a year. Tell us a little bit about it and the channels where people can hear this show and what they might expect on it.
Well, it's on TopShelfOldies.com, which is an internet function. Me, Gary Mitchell, and Lee Michael Dempsey, who's been in radio in Washington for quite a number of years, started doing this about 6 years ago. They do that show once a month. It's called The Time Machine on Tuesday nights on Top Shelf Oldies. I used to do it once a month, but when my health issues started developing, I stopped doing it for a while, and I just recently went back to doing it 4 times a year. So I play a mixture of punk, psychedelic stuff from the 60s, doo-wop from the 50s, R&B, pop R&B, and pretty much don't go past the early 70s at all. There's no modern material at all. It's really not meant to be that kind of a station.
And are you just catering to what the station does, or do you love everything that you play? I mean, there's different ways to go about a radio show.
My intention of what I do is, in particular, to try and find things that people might not have heard before, but based on what they've heard in their life that they might like. I have always, even in the years when I was working as a music director in radio, I went for the out of the ordinary things. I'd listen to the B-sides and tried to make things hits that the record companies didn't think would be hits,
right,
and didn't rely on them telling me what was going to be a hit or what should be a hit.
Plug this side is not your...
I would play things based on their own merit and not because some Billboard chart was telling me to.
What do you listen to these days? Mostly
the older material. I don't listen to any current music at all unless it's something like Coldplay or The Hives, something my daughter's playing or my wife's listening to. They listen to modern music. There's so much that's gone on before that it'll take 2 lifetimes to try and catch up with all the great material from the 50s and 60s.
Right.
And there's just a lot of things I missed along the way. Of course, a lot of that has to do with when I actually started listening to music.
And when did that happen?
Not until the Beatles came out in 1964.
So I was right by saying that the British invasion really grabbed you.
But I was in 10th grade at that point in time. I had never listened to music in my life before that.
Gotcha.
As a kid, I grew up in Japan, and there was no opportunity to hear rock and roll music. And when we came back to the States, it was teen music, Bobby Rydell, Fabian, Frankie Avalon, that kind of period of time. I had no interest in any of that, so I just didn't listen to it. I did comic books, monster magazines, and baseball cards.
Gotcha.
And it wasn't until the kids in school started talking at Suitland High School about this group that was going to be on Ed Sullivan that week that was tearing up the charts in England called the Beatles. I said, well, maybe I should listen and see what's there. I listened that Sunday night, and from that moment on, I listened to all the radio stations locally, sat down every night, listened to the out-of-town stations, KYW in Cleveland, WKBW in Buffalo.
Were these AM stations that were just coming in?
AM, Clear Channel, 50,000 watt stations. Yeah. There was really no FM in that period of time, and FM doesn't go very far. WPGC, which was a local station where I grew up in Prince George's County, they were a daytime-only station, and a year or two later, they went to FM. But it would depend on when sundown was. The AM stations, if they were not a Clear Channel station, they had to sign off at sundown. So PGC was only on early morning till sundown at that point in time. But WEAM and Winks, which I had never heard because I lived in BG County at the time, but I ended up working in Winks 3-4 different times.
Back in the 60s, right?
Well, I started there in the 60s and went back there while I was in the Army and after I got out of the Army, and right before I opened up the store. So I was there 4 different times.
Gotcha. So you graduated high school, went right into the University of Maryland. What sort of course of study were you taking there?
I don't know. I never went to classes.
Gotcha. So that was the problem.
I don't remember going to a single class at the University of Maryland. I was technically a journalism major, but the first week I was there in Maryland, I went into Building FF in the Gulch, which is where WMUC was at that point in time. And Bob Duckman was the station manager, and John Dowling was the program director at that point in time. Actually, Eddie Sachs was the program director. John Dowling was his assistant. They subsequently reversed positions the next year. But for whatever reason, even though I've been only listening to music for 2 years, I was so into it and knew so much about the labels and the artists that they were impressed enough to make me record librarian and music director in a period of about a week,
Gotcha.
as well as going on the air. So once I started there, I hung around building FF in the Gulch for my entire 3 years of Maryland. Went to Maryland for 3 full years, completed 2 years of education during that period of time, and flunked out at the end of the 3rd year. Got inducted in the Army the following year.
And so the Army, you were saying that they took you right down to Georgia, right?
Well, we go to Fort Dix for basic training first. You know, you work out with an M16, and you don't know at that point in time whether you're going overseas or not. It's not until they do the final evaluation. My eyesight was too bad for me to go overseas. Even though I was pretty proficient with an M16, I did pretty well in the course. But I went down there. I went to Savannah first, Hunter Army Airfield. Worked for the Flight Trainer, which was their base newspaper. Did reviews of local concerts and record reviews each week. And then later that year, my parents were getting divorced. I found it didn't bother me too much that they were, because I hated my father, but and I still do. But
Still kicking?
Unfortunately, yeah. But I found out that you could file for a compassionate reassignment if there was some kind of family situation. So I wanted to get back to the DC area so I could go back to working in radio. And I filed for that, came up to Walter Reed Army Hospital, interviewed at their public affairs office. A gentleman named Lou Arendt was in charge of it then, and he hired me. Took 3 or 4 months for the paperwork to go through, but I spent the rest of my time in the Army at Walter Reed, basically doing the same things I had been doing down in Georgia, writing record reviews, taking people like Maury Amsterdam around to the amputee wards. Whenever high-profile people would be coming through, they'd always be, we'd be the ones to take them around. So
nice.
Met a lot of interesting people that way.
Like who else?
Just interesting people.
Okay.
Maury Amsterdam is one I remember the most, because if you remember Maury Doll from the Dick Van Dyke Show, he's always laughing and joking, and he was doing all the slapstick stuff. And then I took him to the amputee wards, and he came out of there. He was ashen. He was shell-shocked, you know, when he saw these young guys with their both legs blown off.
Right.
And he was almost weeping when we finished up. I had seen it many times taking people around. So,
yeah. Kind of used to it.
Well, I don't think it's something you ever get used to, but you
when
accept
you work in
it.
a butcher shop, you know what to expect
Well, I
when you go into work.
wouldn't really call it a butcher shop, but
Not saying
the Army wasn't the one doing the butcher.
No, I get you. I mean, it's just you're seeing the meat, you know, as it were. And not to get Silence of the Lambs on you, but moving forward. So you got out of the Army what year?
72. They gave everybody 6-month early outs because the Vietnam War was
Winding
supposedly
down.
ending.
Gotcha.
Never
Police
did.
action.
Never did really, but they gave everybody 6 months early out. But you were still able to get a full discharge, an honorable discharge.
Right.
So I immediately went back to working at WMUC. I was music director, program director, and doing the morning show for $100 a week for all 3 of those jobs.
Gotcha. They had a deal on that, huh?
Well, at that point in time, it was
It was
a
okay
bit of
money.
money, but I was able to have an apartment in Silver Spring. I don't know how. You know, today you probably couldn't, sleep in the back of a little tavern for $100 a week.
Right.
If you could find a little tavern.
Or $100 then, though.
I'd like to find a little
$300
tavern.
a week now. So.
Yeah, little taverns were great.
Yeah, the one in Georgetown.
Well, I didn't know they still had any. We used to go to the
There
one,
was
in,
one.
in Silver Spring all the time.
Yeah.
On the way back from the shows down at the 9:30 Club, I'd always stop and get a bag or two, on the way back.
So, you were. What stations were you at? Did you say you were at Winks? That was pretty much the first
Well,
big one?
I started at WMUC.
Okay.
And that's where I worked in college, radio.
Yeah.
While I was there, I got Bob Duckman had gone on to work at Winks, and he recommended me to there.
And were they doing a rock thing at that
They
time?
were top 40 station.
Okay.
But one of the guys who worked there with him was a guy named Dave King,
Okay.
and he was impressed by my knowledge of music because I was doing a show at MUC called Underground CPM, where we were playing things like Vanilla Fudge, Jefferson Airplane, Grateful Dead, the things that the top 40 stations wouldn't touch. And there was really no HFS at that period of time.
And that would be underground College Park, Maryland?
Yeah.
Was there any local stuff that was coming across your radar by that point?
In terms of the local groups, there were no local groups other than, say, the Hangman that had music out.
But were any like small-time artists coming to you and saying, "Hey, I'm a solo acoustic performer," or was John Fahey showing up, or was Bobby Liebling showing up? Or
No, Bobby Liebling was probably 12 years old at that point in time.
Gotcha.
I'll tell you how I met the Pentagram guys
Yeah,
later.
let's definitely get to that.